The necklace was not expensive enough to change a life, but it carried enough love to open a wound everyone had been pretending was healed. I bought it on a bright Saturday afternoon, under a sky so clear it looked almost painted, never imagining that one small silver chain would make a laughing mother cry, a proud daughter walk away, and a lonely man finally understand what it meant to be chosen. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that happen when people least expect them, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that may need hope today. My name is Arman Vale, and by the time I met Soraya Mehta, I had already convinced myself that love was something other people found easily, like spare change in a coat pocket, while men like me only learned to live without it. I was 36, a quiet furniture restorer with careful hands, a small rented workshop, and a heart that had been cautious for so long it had almost forgotten how to be brave. My days were simple. I woke before sunrise, opened my shop by 8, repaired broken chairs, polished old dining tables, listened to the radio, and came home before evening to a one-bedroom apartment that always felt too neat because no one else ever disturbed it. Soraya came into my workshop one warm afternoon with a cracked wooden music box tucked under her arm and worry written all over her face. She was not dressed like someone who belonged among sawdust and varnish. Her cream blouse was pressed perfectly, her hair was tied back, and her eyes had the tired sharpness of a woman who carried responsibility like armor. She told me the music box belonged to her mother, Mrs. Nargis Mehta, and that it had stopped playing after falling from a shelf. I remember how carefully she placed it on my counter, as though it was not wood and metal but a piece of someone's breathing heart. When I opened the box, the faded ballerina inside leaned sideways, one delicate arm broken, the melody trapped somewhere in its rusted springs. Soraya watched me like the answer mattered more than money. I told her I could fix it, but it would take time. Her face softened so suddenly that I saw the daughter behind the guarded woman. She explained that her mother's birthday was in 2 weeks, and that the music box had belonged to her late husband. Her father had bought it for Nargis during their first year of marriage, long before illness took him and left the house quiet. Over the next days, Soraya returned often, sometimes to check on the repair, sometimes with tea from the cafe down the street, sometimes with no real reason at all. I learned she managed a small event company, that she had spent most of her 20s caring for her mother through grief, blood pressure scares, loneliness, and bad memories that still visited at night. I learned she smiled rarely, but when she did, it felt earned. She learned I had lost my parents young, that I had once been engaged to someone who left when my business failed, and that I trusted wood more than people because wood, at least, showed where it was broken. By the time the music box was repaired, something gentle had grown between us. Not loud. Not rushed. Just a quiet thread of understanding. Soraya invited me to her mother's birthday lunch as a thank you, and I almost refused because I did not know how to belong in family rooms anymore. But she looked at me with those tired, hopeful eyes and said her mother would love to meet the man who brought back her favorite melody. So I went. It was a sunny afternoon, the kind of day when even old houses look young again. Nargis lived in a modest home with marigolds along the front steps and white curtains moving softly in the windows. The party was small, filled with relatives, neighbors, and the smell of cardamom tea and fresh bread. Nargis was 62, graceful, warm, and sharper than anyone expected. She greeted me like an old friend, held my hands in both of hers, and thanked me before even seeing the music box. When Soraya wound it and the soft melody filled the room, Nargis covered her mouth, and for a moment everyone went silent. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she smiled through them, as if the past had knocked gently instead of breaking the door down. I should have left after lunch, but something made me stay. Maybe it was the way Nargis kept touching the repaired music box. Maybe it was how Soraya watched her mother with both love and fear, as if happiness might disappear if no one guarded it. Later, while guests were gathered in the garden, I noticed Nargis admiring a necklace worn by one of her neighbors. It was simple, a small moon-shaped pendant on a silver chain. Nargis laughed and said she had once owned something similar, but it had been sold years ago when Soraya's father got sick and bills began arriving like storms. That sentence stayed with me. The next morning, in broad daylight, I walked through the old market until I found a silver necklace with a tiny moon pendant, plain but beautiful. It was not extravagant. It was not meant to impress. It simply felt like returning something the world had taken from her. I wrapped it in blue paper and brought it to Narcis's house 2 days later, telling myself it was only a kind gesture, nothing more. Soraya opened the door and looked surprised, but not unhappy. Narcis was sitting in the sunlit living room, sorting old photographs. When I gave her the gift, she scolded me before opening it, saying I had already done too much. But when the paper fell away and the necklace caught the afternoon light, her face changed. Her fingers trembled. She looked from the necklace to me, then laughed softly through sudden tears. And then, in front of Soraya, she joked that if she were 10 years younger, she would marry me herself. Everyone laughed, except Soraya. Her smile froze first, then vanished. The room changed in a way I could feel but not understand. Narcis tried to keep laughing, but her eyes moved toward her daughter with worry. Soraya stood very still, then said she needed air and walked out through the back door. I followed after a moment, confused and embarrassed, holding the terrible fear that my kindness had crossed a line I did not know existed. I found her beside the garden wall, staring at the bright afternoon street. Her shoulders were stiff, her face turned away. She said I should not have bought the necklace. Her voice was not angry at first. It was hurt. She said people always saw her mother's loneliness and tried to fill it, but no one saw hers. She said she had spent years being the strong daughter, the caretaker, the planner, the one who remembered medicines and bills and appointments, while everyone praised her mother's sadness and forgot that she had lost a father too. Then she looked at me, and the pain in her eyes struck harder than any accusation. She asked whether I came into their lives because of her or because I felt sorry for her mother. I had no answer ready because the truth was not simple. I cared about Narcis. I respected her. But I had fallen quietly, helplessly, for Soraya in the spaces between repairs and teacups, in the way she pretended not to be tired, in the way she loved even when love had drained her. I told her the necklace was not a proposal, not a performance, not pity. It was only a small attempt to honor someone who had lost too much. But I also told her that the reason I kept coming back was her. Soraya did not soften. Sometimes pain needs time before it can believe tenderness. She apologized to her mother, thanked me coldly, and for the next week, she did not visit my workshop. The silence felt larger than my apartment. I repaired chairs and cabinets, but my hands moved without peace. I wondered whether kindness was dangerous when it entered a family already bruised by grief. I wondered if I had mistaken closeness for permission. Then one morning, Narcis came to my workshop alone. She wore the moon necklace. She sat in the chair by the window and told me that Soraya had been carrying too much for too long. After her husband died, Narcis had fallen apart, and Soraya had become the adult in the house before she was ready. She missed college opportunities, refused job offers in other cities, ended friendships, and buried her own heartbreak because her mother needed her. Narcis wiped her eyes and said the worst part of grief was not losing someone once, but watching the people left behind lose pieces of themselves trying to survive. That afternoon changed something in me. I stopped seeing Soraya as only guarded or difficult. I saw her as someone who had been strong for so long that softness felt like danger. Instead of pushing, I waited. I sent one short message, not asking for forgiveness, not asking to meet, only telling her the repaired music box had reminded me that some songs returned slowly, and I would respect whatever distance she needed. 3 days later, Soraya came to the workshop at noon. Sunlight fell across the floorboards, making the dust look golden. She looked tired, but the wall in her eyes had cracked. She admitted that her reaction had not been only about the necklace. It was about fear. Fear that her mother would always need her more than anyone could love her. Fear that if she allowed herself happiness, she would be abandoning the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. Fear that I was too kind, and kind people sometimes disappeared after becoming necessary. I told her I was not there to rescue anyone. I was not rich, not perfect, not young enough to pretend life had not left marks on me. But I knew how to stay. I knew how to fix things patiently. Not all things, maybe not every wound, but enough to believe broken did not mean useless. Soraya cried then, quietly, angrily, beautifully, as if she hated needing comfort but needed it anyway. I did not touch her until she stepped closer. Then I held her while the busy afternoon moved outside the window, while cars passed and people laughed somewhere down the street, while two lonely people finally stopped pretending they were fine. Months passed. Not like a fairy tale, but like real healing. Some days Soraya still pulled away. Some days Nargis felt guilty for leaning too much on her daughter. Some days I wondered whether I was entering a family story too complicated for my quiet life. But slowly, we built something honest. I taught Nargis how to refinish an old side table in my workshop, and she pretended to be terrible at it just to make us laugh. Soraya began taking Sunday afternoons for herself, walking through bookshops, meeting old friends, remembering she was more than duty. We ate lunch together in daylight, always daylight, because Soraya said the daytime made things feel less secret and less frightening. The necklace became Nargis's favorite thing, but not because of the silver. She said it reminded her that receiving kindness did not mean stealing love from her daughter. One afternoon, nearly a year after the birthday party, she sat between us in her garden, wearing the moon pendant, and took Soraya's hand. She told her daughter that love was not a debt, and care was not a prison. She said a mother's greatest wish was not to be needed forever, but to see her child live freely without guilt. That was the moment Soraya finally broke in the way people break before becoming whole. She folded into her mother's arms and cried like the young woman she had never been allowed to remain. I sat nearby, looking away to give them privacy, but Nargis reached for my hand too. In that bright garden, with sunlight on the marigolds and the music box playing softly from the open window, we became something close to a family before anyone named it. I proposed to Soraya 6 months later, not at night under dramatic lights, but on a clear morning outside my workshop, where our story had truly begun. I placed no pressure on her, made no grand speech about destiny. I simply told her that I loved her strength, but I loved her softness even more, and that I wanted to spend my life proving she did not have to carry everything alone. She stared at me for a long time, then laughed through tears and said her mother would be furious if she said no after all the trouble I had caused with one necklace. At our small wedding, Nargis wore the moon pendant. During her toast, she made everyone laugh by repeating that if she had been 10 years younger, she might have given her daughter serious competition. But this time Soraya laughed too, fully and freely, with no pain hiding underneath. Then Nargis said something I will never forget. She said that sometimes love enters a house through the wrong door, carrying a gift meant for one heart, only to heal 3. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support tells us that stories of kindness, healing, and second chances still matter in a world where many people are quietly waiting to feel seen. Special request: comment kindness heals if you believe one small act of love can change an entire family. Years have passed since that day, and the necklace still rests against Nargis's heart whenever we gather for lunch in the sun. Soraya still teases me for being the only man she knows who accidentally caused a family crisis with jewelry. And I still keep the first broken music box on a shelf in my workshop, not as a reminder of what was damaged, but as proof that some melodies return when patient hands refuse to give up. I bought her mother a necklace, but what I really gave them was a reason to speak the pain they had buried. What they gave me was far greater. They gave me a home, a family, and the beautiful truth that love does not always arrive with perfect timing. Sometimes it arrives awkwardly, wrapped in blue paper, in the middle of an ordinary daytime visit, and somehow becomes the beginning of everything.